The auction. The hall smelled of velvet and smoke, a mixture of wealth and secrecy. Hidden beneath its golden chandeliers sat men who preferred the shadows, men who purchased what the world declared forbidden. Among them, Alexander Ward leaned back in his chair, outwardly calm, inwardly restless. He had built an empire of shipping and trade, mastered negotiations across continents, and collected possessions that symbolized success. Yet in the quiet of his grand estate, beside Catherine Ward, his elegant but distant wife, he felt a void that no contract or jewel could fill. Their marriage had long since become a performance. Polite smiles at parties, measured conversations over dinner, but no passion. Tonight, he told himself, was not about business or marriage. Tonight was about indulgence. The auctioneer's voice sliced through the silence, sharp and theatrical. A girl was led onto the stage, her form concealed beneath a flowing garment, her face hidden behind a thin veil. The anonymity heightened the danger, and the hall stirred with murmurs of interest. Alexander's eyes locked on her immediately. Something about her stillness unsettled him. Unlike the others who had paraded before, she did not sway, did not attempt to allure with gestures. She stood as though carved from stone, fragile and untouchable. That very restraint pulled at him more fiercely than any display of seduction. The bidding began. 5,000. 10. The numbers climbed swiftly. Alexander remained silent at first, measuring his competitors. Wealth was no obstacle for him. Restraint was. But when one bidder's voice rose too confidently, irritation surged within him. 50,000, he declared, his voice low but carrying. The hall stilled, eyes turned, curious at the bold escalation. The auctioneer smiled, delighted by the sudden leap. Do I hear 60? Silence. Going once, going twice sold. A strike of the gavel sealed Alexander's impulse. The girl was his. He exhaled, a rush of adrenaline coursing through him. He told himself it was the thrill of victory, but beneath it lingered something sharper, stranger, a sense that he had claimed not just a body, but a secret. She was escorted away, and moments later, Alexander was led through a back corridor to a private chamber. The girl waited there, still veiled, still silent. He dismissed the attendants with a curt wave. The door closed, and the air grew heavy. Your name? He asked. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Isabella. The single word settled in the room like a stone dropped into water, rippling outward. He studied her, though the veil denied him her face. It didn't matter. Her presence alone unsettled him, as though she carried a story too dangerous to tell. You'll stay with me, he said, more command than invitation. No one needs to know. She inclined her head, a gesture of obedience, but he thought he caught a flicker of resistance in the way her hands tightened at her sides. Still, she did not speak further. For Alexander, that silence became intoxicating. His world thrived on chatter, negotiations, contracts, flattery. Here was someone who offered nothing but mystery, and it compelled him more than any lavish praise. The carriage ride back to the city passed in silence. He glanced at her reflection in the darkened window, tracing the faint outline of her profile without ever truly seeing her face. Shadows kept her hidden, and perhaps that was what made her feel unattainable, dangerous, perfect for the secret he intended her to be. As the city lights flickered past, Alexander thought of Catherine waiting at home. She would be arranging flowers in the sitting room, preparing her remarks for some charity gala, rehearsing the lines of her carefully managed life. He almost pitted her devotion to appearances. Almost. The carriage stopped at a private apartment he maintained far from his family estate. It was lavish, yet impersonal, designed for nights when Alexander wished to escape the weight of his name. Isabella followed him inside, silent as a shadow. This place is for us alone, he told her. You'll remain here. No one must know of you. She set down the small bag given to her at the auction, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she looked at him directly through the veil, and though he could not see her eyes, he felt their intensity. Why me? She asked softly. The question disarmed him. Desire was easy to explain, possession easier still. But the truth, that strange pull he felt the moment he saw her, was something he could not name. "You were different," he admitted, though the words felt inadequate. Her silence stretched between them, and he sensed she carried her own secrets. But he didn't press. Mystery was part of her allure. As the night deepened, Alexander felt a strange certainty that his life had just shifted. This was no ordinary indulgence. Isabella was not just another hidden affair. She was something else entirely, something that unsettled him even as it drew him closer. And though he could not yet know it, claiming her would set in motion a chain of revelations that would shatter everything he believed about love, loyalty, and family. The forbidden affair. The apartment became their world. Silent corridors, velvet curtains pulled against the sun, and a dining table always set for two but rarely touched. For Alexander Ward, it was a sanctuary carved out of secrecy, where the burdens of his empire and the expectations of his wife could not follow. For Isabella, it was a gilded prison dressed in luxury. At first, she moved cautiously through the rooms, as though expecting chains to appear. Alexander noticed the way she avoided the mirrors, the way her hands lingered over objects without truly touching them. She was present yet distant, a guest in her own captivity. "Do you like it here?" he asked one evening, pouring a glass of wine. She did not answer at once. Instead, she lowered her gaze, her voice almost inaudible. "It is quiet." The response unsettled him. Catherine's replies to such questions were always rehearsed, polished for effect. Isabella's brevity, her refusal to perform, struck him with more force than elaborate compliments ever could. Days slipped into nights, and Alexander found himself returning to her more often than he intended. Business meetings grew shorter, dinners at the estate became excuses, and Catherine's sharp eyes began to notice the gaps in his schedule. Yet he did not care. The hunger Isabella stirred in him eclipsed the risks. Their intimacy developed not with grand declarations, but with subtler gestures. The brush of her hand as she reached for a glass, the soft rustle of fabric when she passed him in the corridor, the way her voice, measured, restrained, spoke of nothing yet carried the weight of something unspoken. Alexander was no stranger to affairs. There had been others before, always temporary distractions, hidden behind false names and secret doors. But Isabella unsettled him in a way the others never had. She seemed untouched by the world he inhabited, his wealth, his arrogance, his carefully cultivated authority. She accepted nothing, asked for nothing, and still consumed his thoughts. One night, as rain drummed against the windows, Isabella finally spoke of herself. She sat across from him. Her veil set aside, though shadows still concealed her features. "I grew up in a place where no one belonged to anyone," she said. "An orphanage. Cold walls, cold beds. The kind of place that teaches you not to expect much from life." Alexander felt something twist inside him. He had expected evasions, perhaps a fabricated story designed to please him. Instead, she gave him fragments of truth, sharp as broken glass. "Did you ever know your parents?" he asked. Her lips tightened. "Only stories. My mother died young. My father, he never came for me." The word struck him harder than he anticipated. He thought of his own estrangement from warmth, of Catherine's icy distance, of the countless nights he had drowned dissatisfaction in indulgence. He felt a strange pull, an urge to shield her from the absence she described. "You are not unwanted anymore," he told her, the words more personal than he intended. Isabella studied him for a long moment, then looked away. Their affair deepened. Alexander visited her in the late hours, intoxicated by the secrecy. He traced the line of her arm with reverence, lingered in her silence as though it were confession. In her presence, he felt younger, hungrier, as though she restored a part of him that had been starved for years. Yet guilt gnawed at the edges. Catherine's voice haunted him during the quiet stretches of night. He imagined her arranging flowers in their drawing room, waiting with practiced patience for a husband who would not return. Their marriage had eroded long before Isabella, but betrayal still carved a wound. Catherine began asking questions. Where do you go at these hours, Alexander? Her tone carried suspicion cloaked in civility. He responded with vague excuses, meetings, shipments, unexpected business. But her eyes lingered too long, her silence afterward too heavy. Isabella, too, sensed the duplicity of their arrangement. "You have a wife," she whispered once, the words spoken without judgment but heavy with truth. "Yes," Alexander admitted. "And yet you come here." He did not answer. Instead, he kissed her, silencing the question that threatened to unravel him. But Isabella's doubts did not vanish. Each night, she watched him with a quiet intensity, as if measuring the worth of what she had become. A secret, a shadow in the life of a man who belonged elsewhere. Still, Alexander could not let her go. The risk of discovery, the betrayal of Catherine, the quiet torment of guilt, none of it outweighed the pull he felt. Isabella was not merely another affair. She had become his obsession, his escape, his silent rebellion against a life of hollow perfection. One evening, as he left her apartment, he paused at the door. Her voice followed him, soft but firm. "This will not last." He turned, unsettled. "What do you mean?" Her eyes, hidden in shadow, unreadable, held his. "Secrets never do." The words lingered as he walked into the night. He felt the thrill of forbidden love tighten into something sharper, something dangerous. For the first time, he wondered if his indulgence had sown the seeds of a disaster he could not yet see. Cracks in the secret. Catherine Ward had lived too long beside silence not to notice when it deepened. For years, her marriage had been a careful performance. Appearances maintained, reputations preserved. Alexander's absences had once been predictable, tied to business and travel. Now, they carried a different weight. His voice softened when he lied. His hand lingered too briefly when he kissed her cheek, and the scent of him carried undertones that did not belong to her. Suspicion grew in her like a steady flame. She masked it well, continuing her charities, smiling at dinners, speaking with practiced grace, but inside she measured every minute of his absences, every late-night carriage ride, every excuse. Meanwhile, in the apartment across the city, Isabella's days passed in uneasy rhythm. Alexander came and went with irregular urgency, sometimes staying for hours, sometimes only for fleeting visits. He brought gifts, silks, jewels, fine books, but she left them untouched, placed neatly on a table as if they belonged to someone else. She had grown used to hiding her feelings, yet fragments of her past pressed through the cracks. At night, she would tell him stories in half-sentences, a childhood in an orphanage, the sound of rain leaking through the roof, the way children whispered about families they had never known. Alexander listened, though unease stirred beneath his fascination. There was something familiar in the fragments, a resonance he could not explain. When she spoke of the locket her mother had left her, a small trinket she had lost years ago, he felt a jolt of recognition, though he pushed it away. One evening, Catherine acted on her suspicions. Without Alexander's knowledge, she summoned Marcus Hale, a discreet investigator known for discretion among the wealthy. She did not speak his name aloud in her home. She merely handed him the details of her husband's unusual absences. "Find where he goes," she said coldly. "Bring me the truth." Marcus followed Alexander across the city, tracing his steps to the apartment. He did not enter, but noted enough. The secrecy, the veiled woman glimpsed once at the window, the way Alexander lingered at the door before leaving. Within a week, he delivered his findings to Catherine. Her hands trembled as she read. Betrayal was not new to her imagination. Rumors of her husband's affairs had always lingered, but this was different. The secrecy was deeper, the risk greater. She said nothing at first, choosing instead to wait, to measure when and how the truth should be wielded. Back in the apartment, Isabella continued her quiet unraveling. She wandered the rooms when Alexander was gone, searching for fragments of meaning in a life that did not feel hers. One night, she opened a drawer he had carelessly left unlocked. Inside lay papers, business contracts, personal letters, and a family crest embossed on parchment. Her breath caught. The emblem was one she had seen before, etched faintly on the edge of the lost locket from her childhood. She lifted the document with trembling hands, tracing the lines of the crest as if it might speak to her. When Alexander returned, she confronted him quietly. She held the paper out, her voice barely steady. "This symbol. I knew it once. How do you have it?" Alexander frowned, taking the parchment from her. "It is the mark of my family," he said. "The ward crest." "What?" Her silence stretched long enough to unsettle him. At last she whispered, "Because my locket bore the same mark." The room fell into stillness. Alexander's pulse quickened, his mind racing. Coincidence, he told himself. Nothing more than chance. Yet the weight of her words pressed against him, stirring a dread he could not shake. He reached for her, forcing steadiness into his tone. "Perhaps the orphanage gave you trinkets from charity. These things happen." But Isabella's gaze lingered on him, steady and searching. "Perhaps," she murmured, though doubt clouded her voice. That night, Alexander lay awake beside her, staring into the darkness. He could not dismiss the unease, nor the fragments of her story that echoed too closely with forgotten years of his own. He remembered a woman from long ago, a fleeting affair before Catherine, and a child spoken of only once, dismissed at the time as rumor. The thought pressed against him now with suffocating weight. Still, he clung to denial. To accept the possibility was to unravel everything: his marriage, his secret, his very identity. Better to bury it, better to silence the questions. Yet secrets never stayed buried. Catherine was already preparing her confrontation, armed with proof and fury. Isabella, too, carried questions that demanded answers. And Alexander, caught between wife and mistress, between desire and dread, sensed the walls of his double life closing in. When he left Isabella's apartment that night, her voice followed him once more, soft and certain. "Whatever truth you are hiding, it will find us both." The words echoed long after he stepped into the carriage, leaving him with the chilling certainty that the secret he fought to conceal was already moving toward revelation. The shattering truth. The storm broke on a Thursday evening. Catherine waited in the drawing room, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the investigator's report resting on the table beside her like a dagger. When Alexander entered, late as always, she did not rise to greet him. "You've grown careless," she said. Her voice was calm, but its precision cut sharper than anger. Alexander froze, instinct telling him that denial would be useless. Catherine had always seen through pretense, even when she chose not to expose it. "What do you know?" he asked. "Enough," she replied. "Enough to see where you go at night. Enough to know you've betrayed me, not only as a husband, but as a man." He wanted to protest, to soften her words with excuses, but the weight of her gaze pinned him in silence. For years she had tolerated his distance, his indulgences, but this affair had crossed a line neither of them could yet name. "I will not ask you to end it," she continued. "It has already ended us." Her finality struck him harder than accusation. Yet even as his marriage fractured before his eyes, his thoughts drifted to Isabella, the girl waiting in the apartment, the girl who haunted his every waking hour. Later that night, he returned to her. Isabella sensed his turmoil before he spoke, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The paper she had found lay on the table, arranged neatly, as though awaiting judgment. "Tell me the truth," she said. Her voice no longer wavered. It was steady, demanding, almost accusatory. Alexander felt his defenses weaken. The locket, the crest, the fragments of her past, they circled in his mind like vultures. "I knew a woman once," he began slowly, "before Catherine. Briefly, recklessly. She vanished from my life, and I never asked where she went. There were rumors of a child, but I dismissed them. I had no proof until now." Isabella's breath caught. She stepped back as though struck, her body trembling though her face remained shadowed. "You mean?" The words would not form, yet the silence completed them. Alexander's voice broke. "Isabella, you are that child." The room seemed to collapse inward. The walls, the velvet drapes, the luxury he had surrounded her with, all dissolved into a suffocating void. Isabella's hands rose to her mouth, a muffled sound escaping as the truth ripped through her. "You bought me," she whispered. "Not knowing, but you bought me." Guilt crushed him. His grand illusions of passion, of escape, of secret indulgence, curdled into something monstrous. He reached for her, but she recoiled, horror etched into every movement. "All this time," she said, her voice fractured, "I thought I was simply your mistress, your secret. But I was your daughter. You made me a sin neither of us can wash away." Alexander staggered back, the weight of her words unbearable. He had sought to escape emptiness, to fill a void, only to find that void mirrored in her, a reflection of his own blood. "I didn't know," he pleaded. "God, Isabella, I didn't know." "But now you do," she replied, her voice breaking, "and nothing can undo it." Silence thickened between them, heavier than the storm outside. Isabella gathered what little belonged to her, a shawl, a book, nothing more. She paused at the door, her figure framed in the dim light. "You gave me a home," she said softly, "but not the one I needed. I will not stay." The door closed, leaving Alexander alone. Days later, Catherine left him as well. She did not scream, did not curse. She packed her belongings with dignified precision and walked away from the estate, leaving him with wealth, but no companionship, reputation, but no honor. The empire he had built endured, but its master was hollow. Business associates whispered of his decline, of his distracted gaze and trembling hands. At night, he wandered the empty halls of his estate, haunted by two women, one who had been his wife, the other who should have been his daughter. He often returned to the apartment, though Isabella never did. The rooms remained as she left them, the untouched gifts gathering dust, the silence deeper than before. He would sit at the table where she once spoke of rain and orphanages, his hand resting on the crest that had unraveled his life. In the end, Alexander was left with the truth he had tried so desperately to escape. Infidelity had not only betrayed his marriage, but had led him into a darkness far beyond desire. He had claimed a girl to soothe his emptiness, only to discover she was the embodiment of everything he had lost. The world saw him as a powerful man undone by scandal. But in the privacy of his solitude, Alexander knew the truth was far worse. He had destroyed himself not through greed or ambition, but through love misplaced, forbidden, and unforgivable. And every night, when the storm gathered over the city, he heard her words return to him like a curse. Secrets never last.